Welcome back, everyone. Today, I am going to do a little bit of self-reflecting and discuss the lessons that I learned in my bachelor's degree. I wrote down 16 of these lessons. I think this will be really cool to come back to later and just kind of see how I grew in my bachelor's, and I want to do this before I get too far removed from it. The first lesson is that pressure creates diamonds. I learned that when I have a paper due, that the pressure of the deadline definitely helped me develop. And you're gonna have things going on like for me, I had things going on in my family, I had things going on at work, and that deadline and the pressure definitely helped me learn how to, just have less life emergencies, I guess, because there was always something coming up that had to get done. And I think that this helped me use my free time much more effectively and not put things off as much, just because that pressure that was always coming. And I think that this really helped develop me in the different areas, like my time management and the way that I care for people even whenever I have something else on my mind. So it was kind of a cool lesson. Pressure creates diamonds. You grow when you're at your limit. It's kind of related here. I noticed that whenever I was taking an exam, or whenever it was hard, like studying for an exam, or even taking an exam, like whenever I was just whooped, making the decision in that moment to push through is definitely like a good life lesson, to really push through whenever you're at the most difficult part of a project. Everyone can work whenever you feel motivated, but not everybody can really push through when they're at their limit. So that was a good lesson. Lesson number 3, I wrote down, you can make excuses or you can get it done. These are all just life lessons, but I noticed that in college, a lot of people just make excuses. They're like, oh, I can't do this because, or this teacher's just so hard, whatever. And not that those things aren't true, but the people who get things done, they find a way. And that's just a really good lesson. I just want to always remember in life that no matter what's on my plate that I have to accomplish, there's just the kinds of people that get it done. And you can make excuses, you can make reasons, you can quit, all those things, but some people just get it done. Number 4, the people with a plan always do better. I noticed that if you had a plan to study for tests, you always did better. And moving forward in life, this is a good thing I just always want to remember. Like, I just always want to plan, or I will always want to have a plan when addressing a certain job or a certain task. Not unnecessarily, but in general, if I have a plan, I think that that's going to help me pillow my head at night, knowing that, hey, I did my best. I put my plan into place, I followed my plan, and if I did that, later on, I can say I should have planned differently. That's fine. But I'm not going to say, oh, I just didn't try my best, because I did. I sat down and planned it. Number 5, not everything in college will be used directly on the job, but a lot will be used indirectly. I think in high school, I definitely learned this lesson, because like geometry class, you're not going to use a postulate or a theorem probably unless you're an engineer. But learning how to problem solve in geometry class when I was in high school was really helpful for me. And I noticed that specifically with Greek classes, I studied to be a pastor in my bachelor's degree, and a lot of people would just say, oh, these Greek classes are a waste of time. Like, I shouldn't have to do this. And even if you never used the language Greek, learning how to learn vocab words and apply the skill of being diligent, studying for tests. I mean, we had a quiz every day in that class, and it met 5 times a week. So I think that I definitely learned. I may not use everything, but the principles I will definitely use. And me personally, I do use that stuff. I do use the Greek stuff that I studied in college, but I maybe don't use the algebra that I had to take because I did a liberal arts degree. I'm still going to use the principles, and I don't want to ever not learn something because I don't think it's relevant, because how am I supposed to know? I don't know what I'm going to use and what I'm not going to use. I may use some financial information down the road that I didn't necessarily think that I was going to have to use. So I always want to do my best to learn. Ultimately, you're always going to use what you learn in some capacity. Number 6, how to be on time. Sounds like a little thing, but we got penalized in our grades if we weren't on time. We could be late to class as many times as I think it was like 3 times if we were late, then that was like missing a class. And the college that I went to penalized you for not being in class. I know some colleges, they don't really have an attendance policy, but we had to be on time in class. And that really helped me in life, because if you are constantly late to things, you don't respect other people's time. And that's harsh, but it's true. And learning to be on time was a really important thing that I learned in my bachelor's. Definitely didn't learn that in high school. Number 7, when you learn how to focus, you can get way ahead. Focusing it's a skill. Not everybody can sit down and not get distracted by their phone and really get stuff done. If you learn how to do that, as Cal Newport says in his Deep Work book, if you focus for 4-hour increments of time, you're going to be able to produce things that very few people can produce. And learning how to focus, especially when there was deadlines coming up, and even learning how to focus when there wasn't a deadline coming up, maybe it was coming up, but it was in the distant future, learning how to sit down 3 weeks out knowing that something isn't due tomorrow and focus was really helpful and has helped me a lot in the different parts of my job, even today. Number 8, I began reading as a hobby. It's kind of cool. I made like a list of books that I read, and in 2021, that's kind of when I started reading a lot, right around the COVID time. And when I started reading for a hobby, I started noticing that there's so much more out there than you're just going to be exposed to in the people that you know. You figure you come in contact with, just say, 100 people a week. It's just a random number. But if you read, then you're reading like experts who have studied on things. And now that I say that, not every book is written by an expert. You have people that write books and they just have a big name, so they sell a lot of books. Maybe they're not an expert, or they're not a researcher. That's fine too. But when you read, you're also expanding your mind to think the way the author thinks, which is really valuable. You're not going to memorize everything that you read, but the way that your brain learn to think the way the author thinks is really helpful. It'll help you be more creative and innovative as well. Number 9, I wrote down, I learned how to be more organized. I've mentioned this in video before, but there's a guy that came in and taught our pastoral class, and he always told us that if your car is not organized, that's like, how are you supposed to organize the church? And I thought that was a really cool thing that I tried to work on when I was in college, is not just be organized in my work, or not just be organized in my school, but also personally. And if you're organized, ultimately you're just spending your time more wisely, because you won't lose things as much, you won't go looking for things as much, and you'll also be more helpful to other people, because if you're organized and somebody needs something from you, bam, there you go, right? You have it organized. You know right where information is at. But if you're not very organized, then it's harder to find information. Then you might want to help somebody, but you don't know where that document is, and it becomes a lot slower. Number 10, I felt like I really learned how to not compare myself to other people in the area specifically of grades. There's a lot of people that I went to school with that were super smart, way smarter than I am, and they would study last minute, or they wouldn't study at all, and they would get A's. And that just really, at first, it like made me just kind of get frustrated. But the more I reflected on that idea, the more I realized I'm not really going to school to get a grade. I'm going to school because I want to learn, and I want to learn how to not just have information in my head, but also be very diligent and have a really solid work ethic. That you cannot get just by, just being, you may be naturally smart, but naturally smart doesn't produce a solid work ethic. And I was told somebody the other day, their kid got an award, and it was the Hustle Award, and it was like for school sports or something. And I told this person I was talking to, that's the award I would want my kid to get. Not because, you're not the MVP, that award looks great, and it is, don't get me wrong. But if you're the hustler, that means you're the one that's going to really work hard. And I just think that some people are naturally smart, but if you have a really solid work ethic, you're going to win in the end. That's my personal opinion. Number 11, I learned that the grade is, I said this earlier, not the real priority in college, but the privilege and responsibility of learning. There's a passage in scripture that talks about, there's not very many teachers, so you're held to a higher accountability standard. And if you are someone who you're given the ability to go to college, like that's a privilege. Steward that well. Don't waste that. Not everybody gets the opportunity to be educated and to learn a whole bunch. I know that literature and reading is more accessible today, but the accountability of a classroom and a professional teacher are really, really, really helpful. Not everybody gets that. Number 12, some students will drag you down if you spend time with them. Oh man, there's so many kids that will walk around school just saying, I'm so tired and I hate school. Why am I doing this? I can't wait till I get my job. And the whole time I'm thinking, yeah, well, nobody's going to hire you because the way that you treat your school is generally the way you're going to treat your job. You're probably going to, if you complain about school, you're probably going to complain about your job. If you are constantly putting things off in school, you'll probably do that in your job as well. And I just learned that you really want to spend time around people who aren't going to drag you down. You're going to want to spend time around people who are doing their best. They let the cards fall where they may, and they move on. Number 13, classes are usually not as hard as people say. I wrote this down, if you just show up and you don't do anything else, then yeah, it probably is as hard as people say. But if you're intentional and diligent, they're probably not going to be as hard. Not that you won't have hard classes, like that's good, right? Pressure creates diamonds. But people that complain a lot tend to just be that way no matter what they're doing. Number 14, you can avoid learning opportunities. You can look at your class, and I learned that I can, do this reading project. I know that I've referenced reading projects before, but I can do this reading project and I can just skim all of the pages, but that's not taking advantage of the opportunity to learn in the class. That's just something that I noticed. Also, if I was always pressed for time, I never learned as much. That's one of the reasons that I really try to work on procrastination, because if you always are doing things last minute, you're not going to be able to put the actual time into that project that you probably should. If you're waiting to preach a sermon and you don't study until the day of, well, if you do that all the time, you're probably not going to be able to preach what you're really supposed to. You're not going to be able to go as deep as maybe God would want you to, and you're not really being diligent. So that was something that I learned. You can avoid learning opportunities if you want to. Best not to. Number 15, I started doing a year reflection. That was really cool. I started that in 2021, and I have the ones from the different years about, it's just like a journal about how I felt like I did in the different classes, how I was doing personally, spiritually, the different areas. And it's cool because I'll get to go back and look at things that I really wanted to work on, and maybe now I have done that thing that I really wanted to work on, or I set a certain goal, and then having finished it, it's cool to look back on that. Number 16, the last thing that I wrote down that I learned in my bachelor's degree was how to study for tests with a system. And I would just do 2 weeks out, 20 minutes a day, every day for the class. And that that spaced repetition was really effective, because you study one day and you come back the next day trying to remember the things that the test is going to be over. And you always do active recall, so ask yourself questions instead of passively reading the material. Those things made a huge difference in my college career. Those were some things that I learned, and I'm just really thankful that, again, had the privilege and the opportunity to learn. I hope some of these reflections may be helpful for you. And if they are, leave a comment, let me know. If there's any of these that you want a video done on, again, leave a comment and maybe we'll be able to get to it. We'll see you guys.